Okay, all praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I ask the Almighty to strengthen the desire in our hearts to serve others. I want to first start by apologizing. My Arabic is beginner level, and I'm not able to explain what I think is important in Arabic, so please do accept my apologies. I'm going to be speaking in English almost exclusively. I want to, of course, also start by expressing my thanks to the organizers, particularly for their hospitality. It's reminded me of the Muslim Brotherhood, so I really appreciate the invitation and all the support you've provided so far. Today, I'm going to be sharing the experiences, some experiences of the UK, and what we can learn as we focus on sustainability and innovation. I teach a course, in fact, I lead a course at King's College London, a university in London, that focuses on international comparative trusts law. And of course, we talk to our students who are practitioners, lawyers in particular, coming from all over the world, as well as individuals who are very much interested in business, whether they're running their own companies or whether they're thinking about investment, about the trust, the Waqf, the Indian Benami, the corporation, the foundation, how these corporate vehicles can be used to meet the needs, whether of government, whether of individuals of high net worth, whether it's multinationals and corporations, whether it's charities, whether it's for private purposes or for public purposes. And what I want to do today is ask you, as I ask the students who come onto the course, that take what you think is useful. That's the first message. And when we think about what is useful, it must be combined with your values. So there's no point in me telling you something that is inconsistent with your values. So we want to make sure that it's Sharia compliant. Some of what I'm going to mention is easily replicable. In other words, you can literally take it and apply it in the Omani context. Some of what I'm going to say can quite easily be adjusted, can be modified, but we need to have teams of people coming together, thinking about how we can modify it for the Omani context, for the Islamic world, for the needs that we must fulfill. So I'm going to point to some challenges as well as solutions, and I want you, particularly those people who are practitioners working in providing or managing the work for Awqaf, go back to your committees and have a discussion about what we're talking about today. I want to encourage each other to share ideas. You're on the ground managing. You know what the problems are, what the challenges are. And I also want to say from the beginning to our esteemed elders, respected elders, that you have a well of knowledge. I want you to hand select. I want you to pick young people. I don't see enough young people in the room today. They are our future. We need to make sure that we enable, we empower, we inspire, we pass on what we have done, and they can stand on our shoulders and take things forward. It's really important that we're training the next generation. We talked about rainmaking yesterday. Are we rainmaking the next generation of leaders? So some of what I'm going to say is going to be directly applicable to government officials here. I'm going to give you some examples of what government officials in England and Wales and the UK more broadly have been doing. Think about whether that can be replicated. Can that be borrowed? Can that be then modified and applied in your context? Okay, the last message as a general theme that I want to ask you to think about is people do not want charity. In my experience, and I've been working in the volunteering community sector for over 15 years, what they want is to contribute. We want to give them the opportunity to contribute. So the beneficiaries of the Waqf, get them in. Make them part of your committees. Ask them, what do you need? How can you contribute? It should not be one-directional. The Waqf just simply donate. It's being managed in accordance with the governing document, and that's the end of the matter. When you're thinking about setting up a Waqf, ask the Waqf, do they actually want to leave a clause, a simple clause saying, if in the future we need to make some changes for the public good, is that acceptable? Is that agreeable? That would resolve so many of the issues about making sure that we stick to the governing document. By simply asking them when you're advising them, can we include that in the governing document? Because times change, need emerges. What we thought was being provided no longer is provided. So small innovations can make a huge difference and prevent us from being stuck. Do we stay firm in terms of what the donor wanted as opposed to the need with changing times? So I've put together a presentation which I hope is going to be beneficial. I want to tell you that the endowment in the context of Britain has a very long history. I could talk to you about the Waqf and its history, but I think quite a lot of that has been done. I could also tell you about very similar concepts, but I'm going to focus on the English Express Trust. There is reason to believe that England, or the British Empire, borrowed a lot from the Islamic world. It seems to be that they looked and said, this concept of the Waqf, or this Roman law concept of the fideicommissium, might be very useful for our societies. I just want you to know how people are borrowing historically and in the contemporary context. It's very important that we look at our national heritage, our history, and see what we can take forward. But I would urge you to think about what internationally is available. So I want to talk to you about two different types of trusts. One is the private express trust, which individuals can set up for the benefit of themselves or their families or their friends. And the other is a public purpose trust, which is the closest that you have to the Waqf. And then I'm going to end with some case studies. And in the case studies, you'll see that there is a partnership between government as well as the civil society sector, otherwise known as the voluntary and community sector, which in Oman is definitely present, but we need to do more to develop it. It needs to be an equal partner with the private and the government sector. Otherwise, we're missing so much opportunity to bring about change and have impact. So endowments are pretty straightforward. You have the capital which can be invested for return. You don't touch the capital. That's the traditional way that endowments have been understood. And the income can be used to fund operations as well as to achieve the purpose that the donor intended. But what's really important is somehow our thinking has become a little static. We seem to be happy to sort of just leave things as they are, but actually there are multiple variations which over time have emerged, as well as the types of causes. So it's not just simply about provision of or something to alleviate poverty or provision of education, but there are all sorts of opportunities, as our esteemed speaker has just mentioned, for us to be able to use the Waqf to be able to do good. I want to tell you that in the UK, lots been said about universities and educational institutions. We've got a rich history. Even universities like Oxford and Cambridge, back in the 19th century, people invested. They invested in chairs, bringing the best talent in the world to these universities so that the future generations could benefit from their wisdom. They could get the best skills. Without the technical know-how, without the ability to be part of a group, a working group, to really take forward ideas, you're always going to be behind, back of the queue, always thinking about what others are doing. I want you to really think about this. What the chair does, this system in universities, is bring the best talent. And sometimes you have to go out to bring the best talent, to develop the internal talent, before we can pass the baton on to the next generation. We also have, in the UK, multiple examples, historically, of trusts which are used to facilitate endowments, which then are also giving funds every year, 20 to 40 million, that they have obtained through wise investment to other charities. So a charity can serve multiple other charities if they've invested the capital wisely. Just think about a network of charities working, and it's charities who know what is needed, and there is this decentralization taking place. It's not dependent upon just one group or one sector, even if it's government. So I don't want to go into technical details, but I just wanted to bring these couple of slides here, including a diagram, in terms of how the English Express Trust works. This is very, very similar, if not identical, when it comes to the Waqf in our context. Without the technical knowledge, I repeat, it's going to be very difficult for innovation to occur, for sustainability to be met, for change that changes, or should I say change that brings significant impact. I think it was Ferris who was mentioning, that means that people's lives, their quality of life improves. So lots of technical knowledge. We have to make sure the next generation and you in the room are confident that you can speak to and use in your work. So here I've got some technical information. The capital is not the property of the manager. The manager has a duty to make sure that they manage the asset appropriately. Over centuries, the state has introduced regulation. But they've done regulation in a way that first was stifling. It made investment difficult. From the 1950s up until 2000, there was a movement. People started to ask the same questions, bring the same critique as we're asking today in terms of law needs to change, more support needs to be given to investment managers. So some of this conversation would be very useful for you to tap into, to be able to say, how did they do it? How did they overcome some of the hurdles? The trust and the Waqf are super versatile tools. They're super flexible. The question is do we feel confident to be able to use the flexibility? That does not have to come at a cost of it not being Sharia compliant. We have the ability to make sure that the two sit together comfortably. Of course we are going to have ikhtilaf. Of course we are. But ikhtilaf is not necessarily a bad thing. It's good for us to be able to come together and say, actually, there might be a different way of doing things here. So here, I wanted to mention to you the public purpose trust. It's a particular type of trust that has to be for a purpose that is regarded by the state as charitable. And what's interesting is that we've got the Charity Commission, which is an independent body supported by government that acts as a regulator, but also as an educator, also as the organization that registers the charity or the charitable trust. So this could be replicated here. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had an institution that just did not regulate, but also educated? So we educate first, we give you the tools, we provide the literature, we get on the phone with you and say, what do you want to achieve? Let us help you. And only if that is not working, the regulation kicks in because something's gone wrong. We talk about transparency, we talk about accountability. But it's not in that order. It's education first, support first, then regulation. Okay. So we continue. Now I'm going to just move on to 3 case studies very briefly because my time is running out. I want to show you that in 1998, the government established what you would call a Waqf, and look at the focus of the Waqf, the scope. It's innovation in science, in technology, in the arts. Why? Because we want to be at the forefront of green technology. We want to be at the forefront of medical advancement. We want to be at the forefront of whatever is coming next that will allow us to have the platforms to be able to reach as many people as possible, whatever it is that we want to put through these platforms. What are we focusing on when we're thinking about the Waqf and its scope? So it started off with a £95 million endowment, but over a period of time, once the government had established it, they asked advisors to help set it up, to manage it, to think about the investment. In 2002, as you can see, within some years, it's become independent. So you do not have to have regulation all the time. You can start off with government setting something up, supporting, enabling, and then you let it go and become independent. Case study number 2, the Youth Endowment Fund. People often think when they hear UK, it's a very affluent country. There are very affluent people in the UK. I usually work with high net worth individuals. You can just imagine how wealthy these individuals are. But there's also pockets of poverty, of deprivation. But need is so great. In the UK now, we have a phenomenon in the last 10 years in particular where we have food banks, where people have to go to a community centre, a church, a mosque, and receive a parcel of food just to make ends meet on a week-by-week basis. I want you to know, in any country, the level of inequality. So, case study 2 was the establishment of the Youth Endowment Fund. Our young people are our future. How many young people are not getting the education that they need to be able to succeed? How many are being excluded? Either because they don't have the money to go to school and participate fully, or because they have autism. They have some sort of disability. They might be deaf, they might be mute, they might be blind. Do we leave these people behind? Or do we actually say we need to do more? Of course there's a welfare safety net in the UK. That's one of the best things that the UK has managed to achieve, but it's not enough. There are gaps, there are shortfalls. What the Waqf, and they don't call it the Waqf, they call it a public purpose trust, an endowment, just different language, exactly the same thing, is being used to change lives, a lifeline. Income from the endowment is to use to support young people from disadvantaged backgrounds to help them succeed in education, helping them get a job. You can have the best education in the world, but there's no job at the end of it. Do we just leave these young people and say, okay, just get whatever job that you possibly can? All of that knowledge and talent is just left. There's a lot of work going on in terms of partnerships to try and bring forward suggestions for improvement. I don't have enough time to talk about that. I just want to mention, look at the investment strategy for the Youth Endowment Fund. 2% return is all that we actually need. Look at how diversified the portfolio is. There's absolutely no reason why you can't take something which is slightly more risky, but without infringing Sharia, and at the same time having very safe investments in a whole range of industries. You have fund managers who are technically very astute. They regularly meet. There's a consensus that emerges within the industry. They have also environmental, social, and governance considerations. That is another phrase for Islamic principles. Are we looking at this carefully enough and say, what can we borrow? They are already doing something which is Sharia compliant. We just have to be alert and pick it up and say, this is very, very useful. And finally, the third case study is from the community. Nothing to do with government, nothing even to do with the private sector, necessarily. You've got individuals coming together who've established the iWaqf, a platform that allows any person or company to put into the fund. They can specify. It's so easy. You click a button, you specify exactly what you want to achieve through the donation. It's clear that it's a Waqf. A Waqfi, it is signed. It's made very clear that you have an option to add in exactly the clause that I'm suggesting. You can change how it's used. And through this mechanism, we're reintroducing the Waqf to the world. So there's lots of great initiatives that are going on. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And you've got some information here that you can look into. And finally, I'm going to end with this. I am extremely happy to see such wealth of speakers. I have benefited from listening to them. I hope you've benefited from the short presentation that I've given. Let's please keep the conversation going. Let's please make sure that we map out the next steps. Let's make sure that we learn from each other. Thank you very much.